All right, go.
All right.
Take two.
Let us pray before we start this amazing lesson. All right, octopus, let's go. Let us bow our heads in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for allowing us to start 20 minutes late. Thank you for having these amazing friends that get here on time. Lord, whatever you have planned for us, I trust that it's a good plan. Even if we do start 20 minutes late. And God, I pray that as we listen to my teaching, we can all gain some knowledge, gain some wisdom from it. And Lord, allow your Spirit to speak through me, and allow your Spirit to open these guys, their hearts and their minds. Allow them to absorb what I have to say to them. And God, let us retain this information throughout the week and apply it to our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. All right.
Because it might not be able to hear him.
So, I was gonna do a short teaching, 10 minutes long actually, but I decided we'll go in depth. Not really, not too in depth, but in chapter 2, we start off with things like humility, or how to imitate Christ, his humility, and then we go on to like another practical implication in the second section where do everything without grumbling, and then now we have this awkward kind of section, Timothy and Epaphroditus. Well, when I first started reading this, it was like about a month ago, and I was like, I don't understand. What does this have to do with everything else, right? And thanks to the trusty commentaries by whoever the guy was that Z provided, it gave me a better understanding of what happened or what's going on with Timothy and Epaphroditus. So we're going to start on verse 19. I hope in the Lord Jesus to send Timothy to you soon, that I also may be cheered when I receive news about you. So in this, there's a small context where Paul was in house arrest, I think, or in prison, one or the other. He was imprisoned, and now he's worried about the Philippians, and he wants to send people like Timothy and Epaphroditus to them to basically understand what's going on with them and sort of grow their spiritual knowledge, which he states later on. And so he uses the word hope. He says, I hope, I think twice or 3 times throughout these few verses. And when he says I hope, it's sort of very uncertain, and he doesn't really know what will happen to him. But either way, he still wants to he wants to send Timothy and Epaphroditus to Philippi. And he continues to say that I also may be cheered when I receive news about you. So when he does send Timothy, he wants to sort of know what's going on over there too. So not only will Timothy be sent to Philippi, Timothy will also return. But the thing about these two sections, the subsections of Timothy and Epaphroditus, is that Timothy actually goes after Epaphroditus. So Timothy or Epaphroditus will go first, will be sent to Philippi first before Timothy goes. And then later on, Paul actually wants to go to Philippi. And because Paul is sending Timothy, he wants to receive news about the Philippians. So Timothy can also be a messenger here. And then in verse 20, he continues to say, I have no one else like him who will show genuine concern for your welfare. I also want to say that there is subpoints in these two sections. It's divided into the paragraph of Timothy and Epaphroditus. I won't really go over the subpoint of Timothy because it relates to my main point. I'll talk about the subpoint of Epaphroditus. It's not really that important, and it's not really that developed, but I will talk about it. And so let's continue. I have no one else like him. So Paul actually praises Timothy. Timothy, who's been with Paul for such a long time, he praises Timothy, saying that no one else is like Timothy. The thing with no one else, the phrase that no one else is like him, it's very it's very strong. It's stating a lot in that few words. So in the commentary it says that there are actually three different interpretations of no one else, and the one that I'll be using is the fact that the people that follow Paul, like his disciple, or not his disciples, his followers, his I guess pupils, his students, they're no one is as good of a pupil, I guess, as Timothy, or in this case, no one's able to show this genuine concern. So he sends Timothy, and Timothy is able to show this genuine concern. And I want to sort of dwell upon this phrase of genuine concern. When you say when you're concerned of someone, you're worried about them, right? Sometimes when you ask them, how are you doing? And then they say, oh, I'm doing bad. And then you say, I'll pray for you, right? Sometimes when you say, I'll pray for you, it's not really genuine. You might forget later on in the day, and you might forget to pray for them, right? So the fact that he adds, I call this a modifier, a genuine. The word genuine is a modifier to concern, where you're saying that it's not just like regular typical concern where you're just worried, it's baseless, but instead it's genuine, so it's authentic. So you're not just, oh, I'll pray for you and then you forget later on. It's, I'll pray for you and I will definitely pray for you and make sure that I keep you in my prayers. So that's this type of genuine concern that Timothy has. And it's very unique for Timothy, because he continues to say in verse 21, where it says, for everyone looks out for their own interests, not those of Jesus Christ. So Timothy, again, he states something very broad, and he says that no one else, for everyone looks out for their own interests. It's almost like attacking people, but Paul is making a statement saying that Timothy is the only one who's able to actually show this interest, or show an interest for God or for Jesus Christ, not to be selfish, right? And this goes down to my main point, which I will tell you guys later. And so Timothy is this pupil of his, and he's able to sort of be very unique in his own way, more unique than his other, I guess, pupils, all other Paul's pupils. So after that, in verse 22, but you know that Timothy has proved himself, because as a son with his father, he has served with me in the work of the gospel. Paul says that Timothy has proved himself. When I read this verse, for someone to to be proved by Paul is very high in authority, because Paul is someone that's so powerful, I guess. He's such a good teacher. He's such a good example of what you're supposed to be doing as a believer in Christ, that if you were ever to be approved of him or approved by him, it's a very high praise. So for Paul to approve of someone, it's not an easy thing to be like, oh, well, he's approved by him, that's cool. And he continues to say that Timothy is a son to him, and he is the father. So they have like a very close relationship. And also, Paul states that Timothy has served with him in the works of the gospel. Verse 23 and 24, it's not really essential to my main point. I'll go over it really briefly. I hope, therefore, to send him as soon as I see how things go with me. So there's a sort of a timeline. After Paul sends, after Paul sees how things are going with him, he will send Timothy. And then 24, he says, and I am confident in the Lord that I myself will come soon. So he says that he wants to also meet the Philippians, or not meet them, but return to them. So this is the first section with Timothy. And then we go on to Epaphroditus. A little bit of a background, which you sort of get from this section, is that Epaphroditus, he was sent by the Philippians to help Paul. But Epaphroditus he he becomes sick, he gets ill, and then he doesn't really not accomplish, but he doesn't he becomes more of a burden to Paul than intended. So he starts off by saying, but I think it is necessary to send back to you Epaphroditus, my brother, co-worker, and fellow soldier, who is also your messenger, whom you send to take care of my needs. So he's saying how Epaphroditus was sent to help him out. He also praises Epaphroditus. He gives him these titles like my brother, co-worker, fellow soldier,
Wait, so
and messenger. Yeah,
Epaphroditus is a guy?
yeah, I think so. Well, I actually didn't check the gender, but I'm pretty sure he's a guy.
My brother.
Oh
This
yeah,
is he. Too.
My brother.
yeah.
I thought it was a girl the whole time.
Anyways,
Usually
there's a different.
You don't.
I think there's a goddess for. Yeah, but it's similar
goddess of
name.
love.
Yeah. Anyways, that's not important. He is a guy, and he gives him these titles like brother, co-worker, and fellow soldier, sort of lifting Epaphroditus up. In this section, he sort of approves of Epaphroditus in a different way that he approves of Timothy. And for Timothy, he sort of states it out directly, says he approved of him. But for Epaphroditus, he sort of gives him sort of like an indirect approval. But I'll explain later on why. So he gives Epaphroditus some praise in verse 25. And now in verse 26, he says, for he longs for all of you and is distressed because you heard he was ill. So Epaphroditus is funny because he found out that the Philippians found out that he was sick. So the Philippians were worried that they sent some guy that just became a burden onto him. So Epaphroditus was worried that they were worried about him. If that makes any sense to you guys, okay? So that's why Paul also wants to send Epaphroditus back, just so that it could calm their nerves, I guess. And in 27, he says, indeed he was ill and almost died, but God had mercy on him, and not on him only, but also on me, to spare me sorrow upon sorrow. So this reaffirms the fact that Epaphroditus was ill and he almost died. And next thing he says is, but God had mercy on him. So he spared Epaphroditus, so he didn't die. And not only on him, but also on me. So what he means by that is when Paul, he's pretty much stressed now that he's in prison and he has to take care of all these things. But now the Philippians sent him this guy who pretty much almost died on him, who was supposed to help him. So it's sort of like you have one burden, now you get another burden stacked on you, and now this guy's dying, and you're trying to spread the gospel, but now you're in prison. So it's a lot of things piling on Paul. So that's why he says, but also on me, to spare me sorrow upon sorrow. So the fact that God didn't allow Epaphroditus to die sort of allowed Paul to have a burden lifted off of him. Mm-hmm. And next in 28, he says, therefore I am all the more eager to send him, so that when you see him again, you may be glad and I may have less anxiety. So he gives you that this is the reason why he will be sending him, and that when they do see Epaphroditus, they should be glad. And like I said, Paul will be less anxious. And now in 29, he says, so then, welcome him in the Lord with great joy, and honor people like him. This verse is important because it sort of tells you a little bit of the mentality of the Philippians. So then honor him, or welcome him in the Lord with great joy. He wants the Philippians to be happy that they see Epaphroditus, and honor people like him. So to pretty much praise and honor Epaphroditus when he does return. A little bit more of like explaining the mentality of the Philippians. So the fact that they sent this guy Epaphroditus to help Paul, who was in need of help, right? He gave Paul financial support through Epaphroditus. So you send this guy to help your fellow Christian, and he ends up falling sick. He almost died. You get really worried that this guy that you send, your helper, right? This helper that you send is supposed to help the other person, right? But instead, he gets sick and he almost died, right? So it's kind of it doesn't really help the person. It makes sort of like a gives them more burden, right? So I have an analogy for that.
Oh, snap. Okay.
It's not important. Actually, let me bring up the subpoint for this section. So the subpoint is that it might be an odd subpoint, but it's not really that developed, honestly. But it's using the fruits of the Spirit to overlook misunderstandings. So the misunderstanding here, in this case, is the Philippians sending this guy who was supposed to help Paul, but instead of helping him, he falls ill and he dies. So the misunderstanding is like, oh, we just made a big oopsie, right? We sent this guy who's useless basically because he almost died. So created more burdens onto Paul. But instead, Paul is using I don't want to say this fruit of the Spirit, but he is sort of encouraging the Philippians to overlook this small like mishap, this small mistake where Epaphroditus almost died, saying ignore that and just bring him in with like love and joy, right? In verse 29. So the illustration analogy I have for that is, so in LIT you want to clean these rooms, right? All these rooms. You have teams that are fighting over brooms, right? Okay, so let's say that you're in need of a broom and you ask the other team, oh, can I borrow the broom after you're done, right? And then the other team, they give you this broom, but this broom is like really raggedy and like it looks like it's gonna fall apart once you like touch it, right? So the team accepts the offer, right? And then instead of, they clean the room, but at the end of it, the broom falls apart and it falls into like thousands of pieces, right? And now you're like, oh shoot, this gift that they gave me, this broom, is now useless, right? It falls into billions of pieces, and now you have this thing that's useless. And instead of being a joy, instead of being an actual gift, it becomes more of a burden, right? But to sort of apply this, going back to like the team that gave you this broom, don't give this broom back with like malice or hate. Don't be like, hey, you gave me this broom, it's useless, right? But instead, give it back with joy. Be like, hey, I appreciate this. Although it didn't really help that much, it's good that you did give me this gift, right? And that's what that's sort of like the subpoint for Epaphroditus.
So if it breaks, give it back to them?
No. So like,
No.
So basically, even if the broom does become more of a burden, don't go to the person who gave you this as a gift and with hatred. So don't be like, yo, you made me have more of a mess to clean up now. Instead, be like, thank you for your gift. I appreciate it.
Okay, this doesn't make that much sense to me, because the team that received it, let's just say that represents Paul, right?
mm-hmm.
Paul is telling the Philippians to sort of honor the broken broom. Okay, but
Sure.
then so from your analogy right now, Paul, he's gonna be thankful. But yes, he is thankful, but he's telling the other side to also be thankful and honor.
Yeah, because it did help him. He cleaned the room in the end, right?
Wait, but
Wait,
Even
what?
if it did fall into billions of pieces. Okay.
Sure.
Sure.
Okay. Anyways, that wasn't the main point, so that's the good thing.
All right.
So it continues to say, verse 30, because he almost died for the work of Christ, he risked his life and to make up for the help that you yourselves could not give. Reaffirms the fact that Epaphroditus almost died, and he did risk his life to help further the gospel. Now the main point, right? Actually, it's right. The main point I want to make is the selflessness for the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really hidden, but it's more prevalent in Timothy, or in the section that Timothy's in. Actually, no. Sorry. It's more prevalent in the section that Epaphroditus is in, because he actually like sacrificed his life to further the gospel or help Paul further the gospel. But these three people, Timothy, Epaphroditus, and Paul, they showed this selflessness for the gospel in their own ways. So for Timothy is this young guy. He's following this guy Paul in his journey, and that's already enough, right? He's already sacrificing his youth to help Paul. But in his section, I'll go back to certain verses, 20, 21, and 22. In 20, he says, I have no one else like him who will show genuine concern for your welfare. Although it's not really a self-sacrifice, it shows that Timothy does show this genuine concern, like I said before. And then in 21 it says, for everyone looks out for their own interests and not those of Jesus Christ. So Timothy sacrifices his own self-interest for those of Jesus Christ. And then in 22 he says, because you know that Timothy has proved himself, because as a son with his father, he has served with me in the work of the gospel. Timothy was approved by Paul, right? And Paul's this guy, he goes around being straightforward, be like, you're wrong, and you're doing the wrong thing, and you should do this to further the gospel, right? Like in Galatians. And so being approved of Paul is a big thing for Timothy. And and Paul being this guy who's very selfless for the gospel, right? In Philippians chapter 1, verse 21, he says, to live is Christ and to die is gain. For me, it's hard to sort of even talk about this verse because it's very powerful. To live is Christ and to die is gain. The fact that Paul is able to say that his whole life is for Christ, and saying that, and having Paul approve someone else because, or having Paul approve of someone else, having him said that is very sort of uplifting for Timothy, telling him that I approve of you because you were able to show genuine concern, right? And so Timothy being approved of Paul or by Paul, it shows that Timothy is someone special, and his selflessness comes from the fact that, or Timothy's selflessness came from the fact that Timothy is this young guy, so sacrificed part of his youth to further this gospel, and further this belief that I guess some people or a lot of people don't believe in. And moving from Timothy, we can go to Epaphroditus. I don't really have to say much about him. He literally almost died for the gospel. Verse 26, 27, 30. Those will be where I'm taking this from, I guess. Verse 26, he says, For he longs for all of you and is distressed because you heard he was ill. Indeed, he was ill and almost died. So this is the fact that Epaphroditus almost died to help Paul to further this gospel. And in verse 30, continues to say that because he almost died for the work of Christ, he risked his life to make up for the help that you yourselves could not give. So Epaphroditus is a very much extreme example. He could sacrifice his own life to help Paul to further the gospel. And now the last guy, Paul. He's almost an extreme case because Paul literally uses everything that he has, his whole life, to further this gospel. The context is that Paul was in prison, right? And the fact that he's sending away Timothy and then he's sending away Epaphroditus, it's almost unheard of because during a time when you're in need, you don't want to be sending away your resources. Paul being in prison, this is the time when he needs help the most. But instead, he's sending away his best pupil, Timothy, and he's sending away Epaphroditus, who provided him with financial support. And so that's already a good enough example for Paul, for his selflessness for the gospel. not only that, he sent away Timothy and Epaphroditus to Philippi to help the Philippians grow their spiritual knowledge. And Paul was also worried that the Philippians were worried for Epaphroditus. So that's another reason that Paul showed this selflessness. He cared about the Philippians more than he cared about himself. So he sent Epaphroditus. And like I said, Paul, his whole life is this example or this selflessness for the gospel, like in the same verse that I quoted before, chapter 1, verse 21. To live is Christ, and to die is gain. That shows his own selflessness. And now for my illustration. This is an interesting illustration. I feel like Sing Lang will already hate it. But this is one of those illustrations that came to me because I just needed something that's along the lines of selflessness and self-sacrifice. Are you ready?
Yes.
You guys know what a praying mantis is?
Yes.
Do you know what happens when they mate?
Yeah.
The guy dies or something?
Yeah, the female eats the guy.
Okay, so the female praying mantis eats the male praying mantis. Do you know why?
Because of selfless love.
No, so there are reasons, right? So there are, of course, scientific reasons why they do eat them. But actually 25% of all sexual encounters end up with the male dying. Okay? So not all of them die, but 25%. But of the 25%,
Females.
a lot of them actually gain they benefit more from eating them, right? So it's a weird illustration, but I'll say it. Just like how the male praying mantis, they sacrifice his own body and soul, right? Literally for the benefit of the female and the offspring.
What soul?
Not soul, but...
There's no soul.
What's the benefit that you get from eating?
So what is the benefit, right? The benefit is that not only does it protect, but give nutrients to the female praying mantis, right? It also provides
Symbolism.
a significant portion of the amino acids
Daily
to
value.
the children. Okay, so to the offspring, right?
Okay.
And there are some statistics. Whenever they do die, so of the 25%, 90% of the amino acids get transferred to female praying mantis. And then if they don't die, 25% of the amino acids aren't transferred. So of the so when they do eat the male, right, 90% of the amino acids they get transferred. But if they don't die, only 25% get transferred. They get transferred to semen. That's it. Oh, not semen, but ejaculants. I don't know what that is, but similar to our version of semen. Anyways, so our so self-sacrifice, right? So the male praying mantis, he sacrifices his body for the female praying mantis, right? Not only the female praying mantis, but also for the children, because the children also benefit from his amino acids that the female eats.
Uh-huh.
That's it. So he sacrifices his whole life for this female that will use it somehow, eventually. And also the offspring.
Interesting.
Is that okay? I also have another illustration, actually. You don't get it?
No. Just move on.
Okay, anyways. I do also have another illustration that does actually pertain to what I have to say, besides the praying mantis. I just thought that was interesting.
The illustration for the praying somewhat works.
Okay, anyways. This is not really an illustration. It's more of a example of what selflessness for the gospel is. So, as some of you guys know, I walk people home, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, honestly, walking people home isn't exactly a fun thing to do. You spend like 40 minutes just walking, and then I could do a lot more with that time. I could go home and sit, right? More relaxing, more relaxing. I don't have to go through all the trouble to walk people home, right? But the thing is, like, walking people home is actually a good thing. I didn't really realize this, but During our meeting, our core meeting, there was a question that came up where it was like, what is the reason that you stayed in youth group? Like, why do you keep coming back, right? And Monica said that it's actually
No,
because.
this is what she said. I left, never came back, and I came back again.
Anyways, that's not important. So she said that the reason that she's coming back is because she's able to have people walk her back, right? So the people that do walk her back or walk her home, that's the reason that she comes back. So the fact that there's someone that's always there to like walk her home allows her to come back to our youth group, and that's a clear example for me. The selflessness for the gospel. The fact that I sacrificed some of my time to help these people come to youth group. And yeah, I guess that's it.
That one's much better.
Come on, it's not fun. It's
No, the
praying mantis is fun.
Mixed. It doesn't click for me.
Praying mantis is cannibalism. So you're
Anyways,
so eating God.
So my application is, well, it's not. It's more of a thinking application.
Okay.
So I have in 3 lines. Think about the things in your life right now. Think about the things that you spend most of your time on. Now, how can you reallocate some of that time for God? So how would you, I guess, use that time, maybe even a minute today, a minute tomorrow, and it'll build up. How would you use that time to sort of further his gospel, right? And that's why my main point is selflessness for the gospel. So instead of being greedy, I guess, or selfish with your time, you could use it somewhere else. Yeah, that's all.
And now are you Johnny Cole?
All right.
Wait, what?
Criticism.
No, don't worry. Praying mantis is pretty cool.
Criticism and good
Yeah.
parts. Good. Or do you like time to think about it?
Critiques. All right.
Or do you want like a minute? Then we all think about it.
How long was it?
It was 31 minutes.
That's about right.
My stomach hurts.
I know.
Not from the curry, from the ramen, from the noodle.
No, I don't know why, but I've been farting a lot. I farted like 6 times this one day. And then I farted like 10 times last night.
Really?
Anyways,
You had diarrhea again?
No.
so critiques.
It's curry.
I don't know. I think I enjoyed this teaching because I really enjoyed the fact that I could do crazy things like add in the story of the praying mantis. I was gonna do other things like do an illustration on League of Legends.
Oh.
Right. The fact that you're a support and you sacrifice yourself for the ADC just so that you can win the game. But I don't know. I'm sure it would have clicked, but I enjoy the fact that I used the idea of the praying mantis because it's more out of the ordinary.
Okay.
And I wasn't sure how I was gonna do this teaching actually. It was very odd because the fact that it was Epaphroditus and Timothy, it was just oddly put there. So getting through the content, I guess, wasn't that bad because I had the help of the commentary. But putting it together, I really wasn't gonna put like I wasn't gonna go through all the verses. I was just gonna be like, okay, you guys have read it, so I'm just gonna go through my points, which is selflessness for the gospel, right? But I don't know. I guess the last minute I just decided that I will go through the verses because it'll probably be more beneficial to understand the whole picture. So how did I do? I said a lot of ums.
Really?
And content-wise, I mean, I got it from commentary mostly. Well, I got the main idea from the commentary, and I did it sort of like essay-based. So I think content-wise, I did okay. I would have liked to sort of relate it back to Jesus more. The thing I wanted to do sort of like an illustration or relate it back to Jesus somehow, but I forgot a lot of his story, so I didn't do it. I feel like my beginning was a bit shaky. I think I could have done a bit more. Not shaky, but it felt too sudden. I think I would have liked to open it a bit more smoothly. So actually, my usual style is going through every verse, so that was natural for me. But I would have liked to actually taken the risk and done a more broad teaching, and actually go into sort of like a Q&A, or not Q&A, discussion type, but I didn't because last minute decisions. And also I wasn't comfortable with doing a discussion, so let's see how you guys react, I guess.
Oh, I thought it was you.
Yeah.
Oh, so let's see. I thought that you repeated like a lot. Like, I don't know if that's good or bad, but like I remember hearing like the part where the E guy. Yeah, the guy, he almost died like a lot of times. I don't know if that was on purpose, but I just heard it a lot. And also with the Timothy thing, but you guys said it was good to repeat. So that's what I heard. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. That's just what I observed. And well, you made it make sense. Like when you said you didn't understand why it was supposed to be there, and the way you taught it, and the what is it? The application you said, it makes sense why it's there now. So there's that. Good.
I guess I'll just go down the list. We'll start from your like kind of background. So for this section specifically, I don't think you necessarily needed to like refer back to like the earlier parts of chapter 2, because I think this one is just like the background of where Paul is, and
You said for like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
10 seconds.
so
Yeah.
for that, I think you should just focus on more on settling on the context of where they are at and what happened.
So you don't want me to talk about the whole. Well, okay, I get your point, right? The problem is that for me it was out of place, right? But there is a reason for it, and it does fit with chapter 2, because chapter 2 is how do you apply sort of these teachings to your life, right? The Jesus part, and then the do things without grumbling part, and then you have this awkward section, Timothy and Epaphroditus. So that's why I connected it back to the fact that chapter 2 is all the things that you can apply to your life, which is the selflessness for the gospel. That's why I did it like that.
Okay, sure. Well, the part I was referring to was getting to the context like straight from the beginning, because I think if I remember correctly, you kind of split it up between like the first couple of verses, where like in the beginning you said this was when Paul was under like house arrest, and then like 2 verses later you said that Epaphroditus went first and then Timothy, and then like a couple more verses later you just mentioned more about how Epaphroditus, why he came up to Paul and what is his connection to him. So I think you can settle that in the beginning and then just establish that first and then move on with the verses. Because if you tell us what happened already, we'll just be able to analyze what happens next and how Paul reacts to it.
Okay.
That was the first part. So I liked your teaching about the main point being self-sacrifice. But what I saw was like, it's not wrong, but it's just, I guess, a preference of what you select to be your teaching. Because I saw a lot of different ways you could have taken this rather than just the self-sacrifice. Like I was looking more at Paul's kind of character and why he decided to do certain things. So why he sent Timothy and why he accepted Timothy, being that he showed genuine concern and he was to the standard at what a Christian should be, and then for like why exactly he was in sorrow, not just because Epaphroditus did all these things for him, but it was this sort of guilt that he was appreciative of Epaphroditus, his suffering, and did not want it to be so much of a burden on himself.
Mm-hmm.
But he still praised Epaphroditus for all that he did. But otherwise, you did a good job breaking down like both their characters and what makes them special.
Mm-hmm.
Although I personally will not have enjoyed teaching this because it's just so weird and it seems more of like background.
Mm-hmm.
But you did a good job connecting it, and so yeah, the big theme of self-sacrifice was pretty well done.
Mm-hmm.
I do think I agree with you that the beginning was a bit flustered,
Mm-hmm.
and you could use a little more time on organization and just, I guess, processing through your train of thought before speaking. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this will help you, I guess, avoid some of the likes or ums.
Well, I mean, everything that I said is actually part of what I want to say, but the likes and ums just came because I wanted to fill in the space.
Yeah.
It's not. It's just a habit.
Mm-hmm.
As for me, I didn't really realize the ums, the likes, because I understood how awkward it was. First of all, it was talking about humbleness, then talks about don't grumble, right? And then talks about Timothy. It's kind of weird. So I applaud you for being able to tackle this, even though you're sort of obligated to. You did pretty well, because the main point was selflessness, which you evidently showed or talked about. That was in Paul, that was in Timothy, and that was in Epaphroditus. Yeah, I thought it was pretty good, pretty concise, and I don't really have any bad comments except where you would sometimes say some things that I wouldn't really get, but then I won't have a chance to
Stop.
say something because I don't want to interrupt you because you're in the middle of your thought. Right, so maybe sometimes you go a little too quick, and my hands don't go blazing fast, so.
Sorry, doesn't be scribe.
I mean, I think that's a me problem actually.
You scribe.
But and the illustrations were pretty cool. I don't get why don't you get the the praying mantis
I don't.
sacrificing his life for the heart and the
I
children.
think that Steven's a hard one to get. Like, I came into this knowing that Steven won't get a lot of illustrations. That's why it was difficult.
You gotta make black.
Wait, is it because
Racism.
it's too animal-y? Like you
No, I
don't
think
like
it's-
insects or something?
No.
I think he needs a very like
Detail?
direct like illustration,
Yeah,
like
Or
exact like word for word, like
where it will
Male,
definitely
good,
show
body,
Yeah.
female
how
for kids.
it's
yeah. I think
connects
that's what
with
he
this.
needs. That's
Okay.
what I think. Because he likes the very boring, the fact that I walk my home one, which for me it was like okay, it's like decent illustration, but it was like it wasn't fun to do, you know.
I understand why. Because it's when it's a personal thing.
Yeah, it
it's
connects
much
more. I understand that too.
Than an animal. Who cares about?
I was like, I don't know why you bring up animal. That's
It's
And
cannibalism.
yeah, that's
Just something to know, like if you're gonna be teaching.
yeah, and that's about it for me.
You gotta make a black joke. I think it was good. I also think you could have went into the background, Timothy, because I think I flipped back when in Acts 16. Paul brings Timothy somewhere, and I don't know about whatever her name is.
Epaphroditus.
His name is, but I feel like he could have gotten a little bit more of a background besides the fact that Epaphroditus got sick. I think there's more behind it and why Paul took him when he was sick. I didn't find it. Yeah, I think that was it. And the praying mantis one, I liked it, but I feel like it was not as well. I know that it wasn't relatable. I understood why the praying mantis did it. I just all the science behind why, like through the semen and all that, like that just straight up makes the message more not disgusting, but more disturbing.
Realistic, you know?
No, it's disturbing. If you think about it, it's like Peter, not Paul, this and...
Wait, what?
So
basically...
He has a creative imagination.
So, praying mantis ejaculates, right?
I'll keep that in mind.
So, like, now you put that down and
I'll keep
put
that
next
in
to it.
mind. I'll keep
You
that in
know?
mind.
It's like this man...
This is too relatable for you.
This
You
man
can't
lost
relate.
it.
You're relating it too much.
Stop.
Too much relatability for
What are we
him.
gonna say?
What?
I just want to say something before Steven goes. I forgot. So when you're talking about the relationship between Paul and Epaphroditus, I want you to be a bit careful about the message because, for me, I was kind of a little bit awkwarded out by like when you kept repeating like how Epaphroditus was like quote unquote useless to Paul. It's not like it's just like I know you're trying to prove a point, but it's a bit of a stretch, like to say that.
Did I use useless?
Yes.
Yeah, I heard it a lot. And
Really? No, I said burden. I don't think.
I heard burden.
I heard
Useless.
burden, but useless at least 3 times.
I think I said he was almost useless.
Oh, well, it's different. It's almost...
Because like, if I did use useless, it would be actually.
Then you're giving like more examples.
Because he wasn't useless. I know.
I
he
know,
wasn't
yeah,
useless,
but it's just the wording. I was just like, I heard.